Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 934. The Betrayer Revealed. Ethan's consciousness slipped fully into Riley's mind, and his physical body went motionless. His eyes closed, his breathing slowed. A steady stream of soul energy flowed from the center of his forehead, bright and continuous, like moonlight pouring from an open wound. Hayes and the others could only stare. None of them had ever witnessed soul power used this way. Even the most accomplished shamans released energy carefully, sparingly. What flowed from Ethan now was overwhelming. A relentless current like a river breaking through a collapsed dam. Just how much power did this man possess? The question barely finished forming before danger struck. A streak of light shot out from within their own group. Fast, precise, silent. It aimed directly at Ethan's undefended body. Onyx! What are you doing? Stop! Onyx moved like a drawn blade released from its sheath. His brush extended forward, hardened by energy until it resembled a spear aimed straight at the back of Ethan's skull. He was not hesitating. He was going for the kill. The others froze not because they lacked the will to act, but because they physically could not intervene. Onyx was the fastest among them. Ginger specialized in speed, yet even she knew she would never reach him in time. Their thoughts collided in confusion. Why? There was no time to protect Ethan. Crack. Onyx's attack struck something solid mid-charge. The sound resembled a fastball slamming into a catcher's glove. A hand had appeared around his throat. He hung suspended in the air, feet kicking uselessly. The hand belonged to Ethan, but something about him was terribly wrong. Ethan held Onyx aloft without effort, yet he was not looking at his attacker. Instead, he stared down at his own body with open curiosity, flexing his fingers slightly as if testing unfamiliar machinery. So this is what having a body feels like. His voice sounded distant, thoughtful. Only then did he lift his gaze toward Onyx. Power radiated outward from him, invisible yet crushing. The air itself seemed heavier, pressing against everyone's lungs. Hayes and Ginger spoke at the same time. Stop! Ethan turned his head slowly. Every person present flinched. The familiar, mischievous expression was gone. The relaxed troublemaker they had traveled beside had vanished, replaced by something unsettlingly pure. His eyes were clear, untouched, like someone witnessing existence for the very first time, except for the unmistakable killing intent behind them. Why? The word came out flat, empty of emotion. No one answered. What excuse could exist? Onyx had just attempted murder. Ethan owed him nothing, least of all mercy. Yet none of them could stand by and watch Onyx die. They had seen Ethan overpower Vale at full rage. They had witnessed soul energy beyond anything their generation understood. And now, even while unconscious, he had intercepted a perfectly timed assassination with a single motion. Everything they learned about him only deepened the mystery. It must be a misunderstanding, Ginger said finally, voice tight with strain as her eyes remained fixed on Onyx's rapidly darkening face. A misunderstanding? Ethan repeated, genuinely puzzled. What is a misunderstanding? His fingers tightened unconsciously. A faint creak came from Onyx's neck. Brock exchanged a glance with Hayes and Ginger. Onyx had grown up with them. He was even betrothed to Ginger, regardless of her personal feelings. Bonds like that were not easily discarded. But the stranger from the ancestral star had every justification here. They could not overpower him. If they tried and failed, there would be no turning back. They were completely powerless. I know what to do with him. Riley's voice cut through the tension. Her eyes had opened. Though pale and weak, her gaze was sharp and steady. Don't kill him, she said calmly. Break his arms and legs. Her tone carried no hesitation. Ethan looked at her, irritation flickering across his face. He rolled his eyes as if mildly inconvenienced. Then he released Onyx. For bursts of energy shot outward from him, wrapping around Onyx's limbs like tightening chains. Crack, 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 crack. Onyx's eyes snapped open as agony tore through him. A raw scream escaped his throat before his consciousness collapsed again and his body fell limp. Ginger exhaled shakily. Onyx's limbs lay twisted at unnatural angles, muscles torn and blood staining the ground beneath him. But he was alive. She did not understand why Ethan had listened to Riley so easily. What she could not see was the truth. Ethan's main consciousness remained inside Riley's mind. The figure standing before them was acting through his autonomous avatar, a fragment operating the body while his true self worked elsewhere. With the threat neutralized, Ethan's attention drifted. He began walking around aimlessly, touching nearby rocks, flexing his arms, even turning his hands over as if fascinated by simple physical sensation. The movements looked oddly childlike, experimental. Ginger knelt beside Onyx. When she looked back toward Ethan, there was no hatred in her expression. Onyx had brought this upon himself. Still, the sight hurt. "Well," Brock said with a crooked grin, attempting to lighten the suffocating atmosphere. "At least he kept all 4 limbs. If he'd lost the 5th one, you'd really be in trouble, Ginger." She shot him a glare sharp enough to cut stone. Brock was still chuckling when a hand suddenly landed on his shoulder. He turned. Ethan stood directly behind him, staring intently. Brock nearly jumped. "What's a 5th limb?" Brock blinked in confusion. Was this some strange joke? But Ethan's expression remained completely serious, eyes filled with genuine curiosity. It's..." Before he could finish, a streak of white light flew toward them and struck Ethan's forehead. Ethan's body jerked violently. White mist flooded his eyes for a brief moment before clearing. Brock turned toward the source. Riley was opening her eyes fully now. The hand lifted from his shoulder. When Brock looked back again, Ethan felt different. Not physically, but in presence alone. The relaxed, slightly lazy troublemaker had returned. Ethan walked calmly toward Onyx's unconscious body. Across from him, Riley stood with Hayes supporting her weight as she approached. "What are you doing?" Ginger asked cautiously. "Let him speak," Riley said, watching Ethan closely. Ethan nodded once. A pulse of soul energy flowed from him into Onyx's mind. Onyx's eyes snapped open again. He screamed, breath coming in ragged gasps as sweat immediately covered his forehead. Hayes instinctively stepped forward, healing energy lighting her hands as she hovered them above his shattered limbs. Ethan observed silently. He could have repaired the injuries himself within moments. A few techniques would have restored bone and muscle completely. He chose not to. "I don't need your help." Onyx's hoarse voice cut through the air, his glare fixed entirely on Hayes. Everyone froze. Hayes lowered her hands slightly, confusion evident on her face. Ginger frowned. "Onyx, what's wrong with you?" "She's trying to help." Ethan resisted the urge to bury his face in his hands. "Please don't make this worse." "I'll do more than yell at her." Onyx spat, turning toward Ginger with blazing hatred. "I'll kill her." Ginger stiffened. Tears gathered despite her efforts to hold them back. She was strong, stubborn even, but she had never heard Onyx speak to her like this. Hayes gently placed a hand on Ginger's shoulder. Onyx struggled to rise but failed, helpless against his injuries. Rage burned in his eyes as he stared upward. "Take your hand off her," he hissed. "She belongs to me." He lay flat, breathing heavily. "I was so close," he muttered. "One more second and you would have been dead." Then she appeared. Then he appeared. Why is everyone against me?" "What?" The word slipped from Ginger before understanding slowly settled over the group. "I'll explain." Ethan's voice drew every gaze toward him. He looked at each of them in turn. "You remember how we ended up here?" "We were looking for a campsite," Vale said thickly, his swollen face barely recognizable. "Saw that big tree." Ethan nodded. "And who pointed it out?" Silence fell. Gradually, everyone's eyes turned toward Onyx. Onyx laughed weakly. "Yeah, that was me." His smile twisted. "I activated the formation myself." Hayes was walking in front. She would have fallen first. Nobody would suspect anything. I'd guide everyone out afterward. Perfect plan. "Why?" Hayes asked softly, her voice trembling. "What did I ever do to you?" Onyx's expression warped with bitterness. "What did you do? You and Ginger turned me into a joke. The entire clan laughs behind my back." Hayes and Ginger exchanged stunned looks. Riley spoke quietly from beside them. "Zayton told me to slow your group down. But when I saw you walking toward the cliff, I released bloodwing moths to scare you back." She paused, breathing unevenly. Then Hayes kept moving forward. "So I trapped all of you in the swamp instead. Otherwise..." Her voice faded. Understanding settled over them all. Riley had never tried to kill anyone. She had been protecting them. Ethan rubbed the bridge of his nose in mild frustration. He had nearly killed her because of a misunderstanding. When his soul spike shattered the illusion earlier, he had seen the truth in a single instant. Riley had redirected them away from death, not toward it. That realization was why he pulled back at the last moment, letting most of the attack disperse. Otherwise Riley's head would not have remained intact. Now everything made sense. Hayes and Ginger looked at each other, finally understanding the jealousy, the resentment, the motive behind Onyx's betrayal. Ethan decided the emotional aftermath was not his problem. He grabbed Brock by the collar, dragged Vale along with a casual wave, and motioned for Riley to follow him away from the tense scene. They moved to a patch of flat ground nearby. With a flick of his hand, a tent appeared from spatial storage. Ethan handed it to Brock and demonstrated how to assemble it. 2 more tents followed shortly after. They would camp here for the night. Hayes and Ginger could deal with Onyx. Jealousy, wounded pride, unspoken feelings, and Hayes hiding her true identity. Those were personal matters best settled without an audience. Ethan's thoughts were already elsewhere. Inside Riley's memories, he had glimpsed fragments of something larger. Zayton was planning something. Riley herself knew little, only hints and shadows, but Ethan intended to learn far more before this journey ended. Chapter 935. Price of the Third Layer Key. Night crept across the sky as their camp slowly took shape beneath fading light. Fires were lit, tents secured, and the restless energy from earlier finally began to settle. The chaos of betrayal, battle, and revelation lingered in the air, but exhaustion dulled its edge. Hayes approached Ethan, her face faintly flushed. Ethan glanced up from where he sat and flashed an easy grin. She immediately shot him an irritated look in return. Without saying a word, she grabbed Brock by the arm and dragged him away again. Brock clutched the watermelon Ethan had casually produced earlier as if it were a priceless artifact. Even while being pulled along, he refused to loosen his grip. Vale hovered nearby with his swollen, pig-like face, staring longingly at the fruit. Vale clearly wanted a share. So did Riley. The small girl proved to be the worst offender. She repeatedly used tiny bursts of soul power to interfere whenever Brock or Vale tried to sneak closer to the watermelon, nudging them off balance or confusing their senses just enough to keep control of the prize. Unfortunately for her, Ethan's repair work on her Gate of Ascension was still fresh. Every small use of soul energy drained her rapidly, and after one particularly ambitious attempt she nearly fainted on the spot. Not long after, footsteps crunched through the grass. Hayes, Ginger, and Brock returned. Brock carried Onyx across his back. The difference was obvious immediately. Onyx no longer groaned in pain, and though he still looked battered, his expression had changed the moment his eyes landed on Ethan. He stared silently for several seconds. Then he lowered his gaze. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Ethan smiled casually, as if accepting an apology for a minor inconvenience rather than an attempted assassination. Brock and Vale barely reacted at all, already more interested in food and rest than lingering resentment. Riley snorted. Zayton always said you were the sneaky one. Turns out he was right. I'm not playing with you anymore. Onyx's face turned bright red. Ginger immediately stepped in, smoothing over the awkwardness with practiced ease, and Onyx responded with an almost embarrassingly soft grin directed only at her. Ethan rolled his eyes. He did not hate Onyx. The man's emotions were understandable, even predictable. Ethan simply disagreed with how he had handled things. Waiting, scheming, and sabotaging from the shadows felt inefficient. If Ethan had been in his position, he would have confronted the problem directly and ended it cleanly. The thought unexpectedly dragged him back to memories of his previous life. Zachary, Ivy. What once felt tragic now seemed almost absurd. If not for them, he would never have died. Never have reincarnated. Never met Lila, Amber, or Rainey. Strange how betrayal sometimes became the doorway to something better. He realized he had been staring into nothing when Hayes suddenly appeared in front of him. We need to talk. Her voice was unmistakably feminine now. She made no effort to disguise it. Talk. Ethan blinked. Yeah, come on. She turned and walked away without waiting for agreement. Ethan sighed, pushed himself to his feet, and followed. They stopped a fair distance from camp where the sounds of conversation faded into quiet wind and rustling grass. Hayes turned sharply. Why are you really traveling with us? There was no preamble or politeness. Because I'm bored, Ethan replied with a shrug. Will that work? Her eyebrow lifted immediately. She was not amused. All right, he said, raising his hands slightly. Truth is, I'm not here for the trial itself. I just want to leave this place. At first I thought you locals might know something useful, but you're all first-timers too. Everything you know comes second-hand from your families. Not exactly helpful. He paused before continuing. Then you mentioned the third layer entrance needs a trigger to open, and I want to meet Zayton. You said he's the strongest of your generation. There was no reason to hide it. That's it? Hayes asked skeptically. What? You think I'm here to steal your clan's treasures? She rolled her eyes, the gesture entirely feminine despite the masculine clothing she still wore. The contrast remained oddly unsettling. Zayton is strong, she admitted. But her words trailed off before she changed direction entirely. You said you're not a trial participant. Then how did you get here? Ethan's expression darkened slightly. I got set up. Set up? I was planning an ambush. Walked straight into someone else's trap instead. Who? A temple lord. Hayes' voice jumped an entire octave. A temple lord? Ethan winced and rubbed his ear. Would you keep it down? Keep it down, she hissed, still loud despite trying to lower her voice. Do you understand what that means? You weren't invited into a trial. Someone imprisoned you here. Her frustration was obvious. And I thought you might. She stopped herself. You thought what? Ethan pressed. Don't stop halfway. She hesitated before asking another question instead. Do you want to know what Zayton and I are actually fighting over? Ethan shook his head at first, then paused as realization dawned. Wait, you entered with around 100 people, right? Don't tell me it's just the 5 of you competing against everyone else. Hayes looked embarrassed, then she nodded. Ethan stared at her. You're serious? 5 people planning to ambush 100? And Brock was talking about stuffing Zayton into a sack like it was a hunting trip? He genuinely could not believe it. 5 people. 1 healer. 1 speed specialist. 1 unstable powerhouse. 1 strategist who had just betrayed them. And Brock. Hayes straightened stubbornly despite her flushed cheeks. What do you know? Zayton's strong, yes, but I'm the only healer here besides my master. In the second layer, anyone who wants treatment has to come through me. Even Zayton. That amateur healing of yours? Ethan snorted. She looked seconds away from attacking him. He wisely changed the subject. So what exactly are you fighting over? Her expression became serious. A pass. The key to the 3rd layer. She produced a jade token. Ethan immediately recognized it. Earlier, when they were trapped by the illusion near the massive tree, she had attempted to use this very object to break through the formation before Riley intervened with her bloodwing moths and redirected them into the swamp. Now Hayes claimed it was the true objective. Here. She handed it to him. What is it? The activation disk for the 3rd layer entrance. 2 survived. Zayton has the other. If this opens the entrance, why fight at all? Ethan asked. Channel soul energy into it, Hayes said, watching him closely. He frowned but complied. The moment his energy touched the disk, everything exploded. Boom! Blinding light erupted outward. A violent shockwave flattened grass and bent nearby trees away from him in a widening circle. Ethan staggered. His face cycled through pale, red, and sickly green before stabilizing. He nearly dropped the disk as a horrifying realization struck him. Nearly 1/3 of his soul energy had vanished instantly. The disk had devoured it. I knew it! Hayes snatched the token back excitedly, inspecting it like a child who had finally confirmed a long-held theory. What was that? Ethan asked flatly. The key we plan to fight over is guarded by a celestial beast with an incredibly powerful soul. The disk needs massive energy to activate. Her grin widened. Now we don't need to fight it. Zayton can waste his strength dealing with the beast while we open the entrance ourselves. She spun toward camp. Pack up. We leave for the 3rd layer tonight. Ethan followed, still irritated but unable to deny that advancing faster aligned perfectly with his own goals. The group packed quickly. Ethan stored the tents effortlessly. But one problem remained: Nyx could not walk. Brock and Vale alternated carrying him, slowing their pace significantly. Hayes attempted healing several times, but her techniques only stabilized his condition rather than restoring mobility. Nearly an hour passed before Ethan finally spoke. Stop! Everyone halted, confused. Ethan walked directly toward Brock. Give him to me. Brock puffed out his chest stubbornly. I'm fine. I can keep going. Ethan ignored him and lifted Onyx off his back. Onyx gasped as pain flared through his body. Ginger's expression tightened immediately, concern written plainly across her face. Everyone assumed Ethan planned to carry him instead. Instead, Ethan dropped Onyx onto the ground. What are you doing? Hayes hurried over, alarmed, convinced he was abandoning dead weight. Ethan cracked his knuckles slightly. Best healer here, right? Watch. He inhaled slowly as tree form awakened within him. Rejuvenation. Healing touch. Life bloom. Wild growth. Rather than releasing the spells individually, he compressed them together, layering technique upon technique within his palm. Energy poured outward. The grass beneath his feet withered instantly. He was drawing vitality from everything within nearly 100 yards. A swirling green sphere formed in his hand, dense with living energy, pulsing like a miniature heart. Go! He pressed it onto Onyx's chest. Hayes' jaw dropped completely open. Ginger grabbed her arm nervously. Is he going to be okay? Despite everything, she still struggled to trust Ethan after watching him shatter Onyx's limbs earlier. But the energy radiating from the sphere felt undeniable. Pure life. He'll be fine, Hayes murmured absently. Her attention was no longer on Onyx at all. This man possessed monstrous physical strength, overwhelming soul power, and now healing techniques far beyond anything she had ever witnessed, even surpassing her own master. She watched Ethan carefully, a new thought forming in her mind. If I could convince him to treat my master. Her eyes gleamed quietly in the darkness. Chapter 936. One strike against the stone giant. Ethan didn't have time to dwell on what she might be thinking. His mind had already moved ahead, piecing together something far more urgent. If being a soul wielder really was the fastest path to reaching the next layer, then hesitation and weakness would only slow them down. There was no room for dead weight, not here. So he healed Onyx. The shift into tree form came as naturally as breathing now. His energy core had fully recovered, his reserves brimming, and his skills flowed without resistance, as if they had always belonged to him. But this time something felt different. Something clicked. Energy fusion. His healing abilities weren't just his own anymore. As he cast them, he felt the world respond, felt the life in the surrounding plants stir and answer his call. He could draw from them, pull that vitality into his spells, and amplify their effects far beyond what they should have been. It wasn't resurrection. He wasn't defying death itself. But as long as there was still a pulse, even the faintest thread of life, he could pull someone back from the edge. The others stared at him as if he had sprouted another head. Healers were rare. Not just rare, but vital in a way that decided who lived and who didn't. In a place like this, that made them priceless. This world was meant to be a trial ground, a proving place. For them, it had become something else entirely. Prison. Their ancestors had been trapped here generations ago, and no one had ever found a way out. Even the first layer, the place they called home, offered no safety. Beast surges swept through without warning, leaving death in their wake. Entire families had been lost to them. Their clan's healing lineage came from a single bloodline. Hayes. Her master was her grandfather, a strange old man who insisted she call him master instead of grandpa, as if keeping emotional distance would somehow make the burden easier to carry. Her father had died during a beast surge. He had stayed behind too long, tending to the wounded, refusing to abandon them even as the danger closed in. By the time he tried to retreat, it was already too late. Now Hayes was still inexperienced, not yet fully grown into her role, while her grandfather stood at the edge of his life. When he was gone, she would be the only healer left. And as Ethan had bluntly pointed out, she wasn't good. Not yet. The clan leader worried about that constantly. After her father's death, he had made a strict rule. The healer's life was worth more than anyone else's. No matter the situation, no matter the cost, the others were to take the risk instead. If necessary, they would knock the healer unconscious and drag them to safety. Very few people knew the truth about Hayes. Not even the clan leader. If he found out she was a woman, the stress alone might finish him off. There was no guarantee the healing ability would pass on, even if she had children. If the bloodline ended with her, life in the first layer would only become harsher. That was why her grandfather had hidden the truth. But secrets had a way of slipping through the cracks. Ginger knew, and that was why the two of them were so close. It was also why Onyx couldn't stand either of them. Now there were 7 of them moving through the forest, with Riley having joined along the way. They had long since left the safe path behind, and Hayes found herself growing increasingly uneasy. We should turn back, she said quietly. Ethan didn't even slow down. Too much trouble. We go straight through. Whatever's in the way, we deal with it. Brock and Vale immediately lit up at that. Now that's what a man sounds like. Brock laughed. Riley pumped her fist in the air, clearly delighted by the idea of chaos. The rest exchanged uneasy glances, but no one tried to stop him. Ethan had already shown enough of what he could do. They trusted that, even if they didn't fully understand it. Stay close, he said, picking a direction without hesitation. Then he moved. The ground exploded beneath his feet as he launched forward like a cannonball. The shockwave sent birds scattering into the sky and beasts howling in alarm. Hayes couldn't help the spark of excitement in her eyes as she watched him go. Brock and Vale whooped loudly and charged after him without a second thought. Ethan relied purely on physical strength, and none of them could match his speed. Moving through the forest like this should have been reckless, even suicidal, but every landing he made was precise, every push-off perfectly timed. It was as if the terrain itself bent to accommodate him. Travel form made the difference. In his stag form, The forest wasn't an obstacle but an extension of himself. Leaping between trees, weaving past boulders, adjusting midair, it all came as naturally as breathing. Still, he had to pause now and then, waiting for the others to catch up. He could have gone ahead alone. He would have reached the entrance to the third layer much faster that way. But these people had helped him. That mattered. He would see them through, help them reach the higher layers, help them gather what they needed, whether it was rare herbs or celestial beast cubs. A strong companion beast could mean the difference between life and death in the first layer, especially for a clan as small as theirs. About half an hour later, the forest began to thin. The dense canopy gave way to open ground scattered with jagged rocks and towering stone formations in the distance. "What's that red zone?" Ethan asked as he stopped at the edge, waiting for the others. "Stone giant," Hayes replied, her gaze fixed ahead. "You know what's in there? The second layer's been mapped. Our ancestors charted it." "How strong?" "I don't know." Ethan frowned. "Then what's the point of calling it mapped?" "The terrain is mapped," she shot back, irritation flashing in her eyes. "Not the monsters. And it's been generations. It might not even be the same creature anymore. Could have grown stronger." They held each other's gaze for a moment before Ethan shrugged. "Fine. Let's find out." He stepped forward. Hayes let out a quiet sigh. "Are we really doing this? What choice do we have?" Ginger said. "He's the strongest one here." Before Hayes could respond, Brock and Vale came crashing through the trees behind them. Riley perched on Brock's shoulders as they turned the whole thing into a competition, smashing through branches and undergrowth like a pair of charging beasts. They rushed past Hayes, Ginger, and Onyx without slowing. "Men?" Onyx muttered, shaking his head with quiet disdain. Ginger raised an eyebrow. "That bothers you? Guess you're not one, then." She took off after the others. Onyx stood there for a second, blinking in confusion, then looked at Hayes. She only shrugged. "How did I end up losing that argument?" he muttered, before following. Right then, a sudden crack split the air. The ground trembled, and in the distance, the towering stone spires began to collapse. What they had taken for part of the landscape shifted, rising slowly, revealing itself piece by piece. Those weren't spires, they were hair. Each strand stood dozens of feet tall, and as the massive figure continued to rise, its true scale became clear. Ethan skidded to a stop. The creature kept growing, its form unfolding until he went from looking straight ahead to craning his neck upward, higher and higher, until he found himself staring into a single massive eye the size of a courtyard. "One eye," he murmured. "Stone giant." It stood nearly 1,000 yards tall, its body thick and uneven, flakes of stone breaking off and crashing down like falling cliffs. It had already noticed them. To it, they were nothing more than insects. The giant let out a roar that shook the air itself, slamming its massive fists into the ground, each impact sending tremors through the earth. Dust and debris filled the air, forcing them to shield their eyes. Even Onyx, who always carried himself with quiet confidence, looked unsettled. Ginger drew her sword, though the weapon looked pitifully small in comparison, like a needle against a mountain. She wasn't even sure it could pierce the creature's skin. Everyone braced themselves, tension coiling through their bodies. Riley's grin had vanished. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between the giant and the group. He stood there calmly, his clothes whipping violently in the wind. Yet any debris that came too close seemed to disintegrate before reaching him, turning to dust and sliding harmlessly past. The others steadied themselves as they watched him. He had surprised them before. Maybe he would do it again. That thin figure standing there felt impossibly small, like something fragile standing against a tidal wave, yet it held firm. The giant's roar faded. His pounding stopped. Its massive red eye locked onto them. Then it lifted its foot, an enormous mass of stone and flesh rising into the air before beginning its descent. "Move!" Hayes shouted. But before anyone could react, a crack tore through the air. Ethan had already launched. The ground beneath him fractured outward like a spiderweb, and he broke the sound barrier in an instant, the echo lagging behind his movement. A flash of silver cut across the sky. The giant's foot halted midair. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then it wobbled. A thin line appeared across it, and the entire foot split cleanly in half, the cut so smooth it reflected the moonlight like polished glass. High above, Ethan hovered in the air, silhouetted against the full moon. The giant's foot wasn't the only thing that had been cut. Half its head slid free. A moment later, the rest of its massive body followed, collapsing with a thunderous impact that shook the ground. Ethan remained suspended in the sky, a 7-foot spear in his hand, his figure calm and unmoving, like a god. "It's dead." Onyx's voice was barely above a whisper, his pupils shrinking to pinpoints. "That's it?" Riley asked, sounding almost dazed. "Who yelled move?" Brock said as he jogged back, looking annoyed. Move where? Nearly scared me for nothing. Hayes didn't respond. She simply stared upward, her mouth slightly open. She had underestimated him. One strike. A 3-star celestial beast, the stone giant, killed instantly. 3 stars might not sound impressive, but it marked the peak of low-tier beasts. Even the 4 guardians of their clan could take one down, but not like this. Not in a single attack. And stone giants were known for their absurd defense, rivaling even 5-star beasts. How did he? Ginger murmured, her hand tightening slightly around her sword. She followed the path of the blade, the perfect cut, the idea of ending everything in a single strike. That was her path. But this was something else entirely. Ethan kept breaking everything she thought she understood about power. No one was supposed to have everything. Strength and durability came together in people like Vale, while someone like Riley proved that a powerful soul often came with a fragile body. Ethan had both. And on top of that, he could heal not just casually, but with a depth that usually took years of communion with nature. People like him weren't supposed to exist. And that strike, that wasn't just power. Her eyes shifted to the spear in his hand. It has to be the weapon, she said quietly, almost to herself. It has to be that sharp. Because if it wasn't, then everything she believed about the sword, about her path, would begin to fall apart. No one could be that good. Onyx watched her from the side, his lips parting slightly as if he wanted to say something. In the end, he said nothing and swallowed the words instead. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.